let's get to the story because the story's kind of amazing, and again, it's why people don't trust the media. So let me I'll just go through it very quickly. I took out a couple of paragraphs that kind of explain it. Reuters and the BBC solicited multi-million-dollar contracts to advance the British state's interventionist aims, promising to cultivate Russian journalists through FCO-funded tours and training sessions. What is the FCO, Max?
That's the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office.
Okay.
Which is the equivalent of the State Department or the Foreign Ministry of the UK.
Okay. So Reuters and the BBC solicited, not only did they get millions of dollars from the government to cultivate Russian journalists and establish influence networks in and around Russia and promote pro-NATO narratives in Russian-speaking regions. So Reuters and the BBC took money from the government, pro-NATO governments, to push a pro-NATO narrative. That's what you uncovered. That's a big deal, right?
Yeah, and the FCO, the Foreign Office's structure is a little different than the State Department. It actually presides over the MI6, which is the UK's foreign intelligence service, their equivalent of the CIA. So what we're looking at here is an intelligence operation, not simply sort of diplomacy.
Right. So it's like so it's like if the CIA was doing that, they were paying Reuters and say the AP to go do that's an intelligence operation. That's not diplomacy, as you said. Even if it was, it's still wrong. In several proposals to the British Foreign Office, Reuters boasted of a global influence network of 15,000 journalists and staff, including 400 inside Russia. So you know what's funny is when I was telling the truth about Syria in real time, when they were when the CIA was doing a proxy war inside Syria, they trying to overthrow the Assad regime, and I would tell the truth about it. I would see all these journalists, and I'm like, who are these guys? And they were like, oh, they're all being funded by people like this. So all these guys that were coming after me on Twitter and Facebook, they're all funded by like Bellingcat. They're all funded by foreign governments, by intelligence agencies to do ops on people like me and try to discredit people who are telling the truth. And it's so weird to see that happen. And that's they have 15,000 journalists working for them that they can tell, and 400 inside Russia. Okay.
Yeah, actually, sorry to interrupt, but Ben Norton wrote a piece for us based on these leaks, previous series of leaks on the Syria aspect of it, which showed that many of these same intelligence contractors that were being funded by the British state were feeding stories to journalists. They had established networks of journalists on Syria, inside and outside Syria, and they were claiming credit for producing stories with some of the most esteemed news networks on the planet. So you're absolutely right, and we have the receipts.
So a little bit more from their story. The UK Foreign Office projects were carried out covertly and in partnership with purportedly independent, high-profile online media outfits, including Bellingcat, Medusa, and Mediazona. I never heard of Mediazona. Bellingcat's participation included a UK Foreign Office intervention in North Macedonia's 2019 elections on behalf of the pro-NATO candidate. The British government has denied freedom of information requests about the division's budget and stonewalled members of parliament who sought data about its budget and agenda, citing national security to block their demands for information. BBC Media Action proposed growing pro-NATO media in conflict areas like the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine, where a proxy war has raged since 2014 between the Western-backed Ukrainian military and pro-Russian separatists. It was textbook information warfare, weaponizing broadcast media to turn the tide of battle in a protracted, grinding conflict. Previously known as Breakthrough, The Zinc Network, so that's what you're exposing here. It's called the Zinc Network, has contracted for the UK Home Office to covertly implement media projects propagandizing British Muslims under the auspices of the Prevent De-Radicalization Initiative. So here's the graphics you have. So there's the Zinc. Here's their partners. There's Bellingcat, Media Diversity, Digital Forensic Lab, Research Lab, Toro, Ecoris. And so technical proposal, a network of non-governmental organizations submitted by Zinc. And here's where they submit. Here's all their partners. In a document marked private and confidential, Zinc Network revealed the consortium's role in setting up a YouTuber network in Russia and Central Asia designed to propagate the message of the UK and its NATO allies. And by the way, this is from 2019. This is Elliot Higgins. This is the guy that we've exposed on this show before as being a total fraud and doing straight up propaganda for the Western intelligence agencies. And he's the one who smeared people who were telling the truth about Syria, us included, and never corrects anything. So he tweeted this out in 2019. He was bragging. He said, looking forward to getting things rolling with the open information partnership with Bellingcat, MDI UK, DFR Lab, and this is Zinc. So he's admitting that this is a thing. And he's saying that in 2019. In recent years, the BBC and Reuters have played an increasingly aggressive part in demonizing the governments of countries where London and Washington are seeking regime change. Meanwhile, high-profile online investigative outlets like Bellingcat have sprouted up seemingly overnight to assist these efforts. So what's going on is that we have intelligence agencies, Western governments, funding propaganda people like Bellingcat, and they're then promoted as actual journalists. They're not. They're straight up propagandists. And now, Max, how did you find this out, that Reuters and the BBC was involved in this? How did you find that out?
Well, we have no relationship with any hackers at the Gray Zone, but there have been these leaks of documents that have gone out through a group called Anonymous, which has its own, basically sets up its own website. And we knew that they were out there. Even other outlets were even starting to report on it. And I went through the documents. I was familiar with them. Because of previous investigations we'd done on them. They apparently came out from this really shadowy initiative within the British Foreign Office called the Counter Disinformation and Media Development Program. And what I found was really stunning. You had the British Foreign Office through the CDMD, that shadowy little program, which members of parliament like Chris Williamson, who was a socialist who was drummed out of labor in their like fake anti-Semitism witch hunt scandal. He was trying to get information about this, and they were stonewalling him on national security grounds. So these documents come out. And in this latest round, I found all of these Foreign Office proposals where they would say, you know, we want to do capacity building in the Balkan region to help get our message out and to counter the Russian government's efforts to reach the Russian-speaking population. And then Thomson Reuters would come in. That's the parent company of Reuters and its little foundation. Reuters happens to be the largest media network in the world with, 15,000 people in its network. And they put forward these detailed bids proposing to satisfy what the British Foreign Office was seeking. And they even mentioned that they had performed these kinds of programs in the past. And in capacity building, what they were doing was bringing, dozens or even scores of Russian journalists over to London, funded by the UK FCO, so state-funded trips, and they would train them, network them together, produce. They promised to produce attitudinal changes. That was in Reuters documents. Make them more pro-British, which means more pro-NATO, and just grooming them as little media puppets, and then sending them back to Russia. In addition, Reuters, talked about its pre-established networks. And they mentioned in many of these documents the need for secrecy. Two of the contracts between Reuters,
But Max, can you overstate the corruption involved? I mean, the opposite.
I mean,
can you
this is everything that Russia is accused of doing, usually like often falsely. This proves that the most august, esteemed, largest news organizations in the West are doing times 10. And I mean, I'm just scratching the surface here with these tours, but it's important to note, Reuters was doing this behind a veil of secrecy. The contracts between them and the Foreign Office were marked private and confidential. They discussed bringing journalists to London in the midst of the Skripal poisoning intrigue, that whole affair, which escalated tensions between the UK. It really brought Russiagate to the UK, and kind of it was just shrouded in so much mystery and strangeness. But they brought Russian journalists there at the time, and Reuters mentions in its bid that they were coordinating with the British embassy in Moscow to maintain the secrecy of the program. So Reuters is lying to the public, and they've specifically lied to the public when in January of 2020, some old British Foreign Office documents were declassified. After like 40 or 50 years, documents get declassified. This wasn't a hack or a leak. And it showed that Reuters had been getting paid by the British intelligence services, the MI6, during the 60s and 70s to run anti-Soviet media programs in Latin America. So a Reuters spokesman comes out and says, we don't do this stuff anymore today. This is a thing of the past. We don't accept government money. We are independent, and we have our trust principles. And you go to their website, and their trust principles are like, we cherish objectivity and independence, and we believe in the public trust. And what these documents show is that is an absolute lie, and they are conducting secret covert ops, information warfare operations with the British state to satisfy the Foreign Office's demand for media that weakens Russia. This also entails actually creating media, funding supposedly independent outlets like Medusa and Media Zona, which was founded by two members of Pussy Riot, which is like the favorite punk rock performance group of every NATO cabinet minister, and basically creating an entire media architecture throughout Russia's near abroad, from the Balkans to Ukraine to Central Asia. And one of the most remarkable documents, shocking.
I mean, this should be such an unbelievable, huge scandal.
Yeah.
I mean, this is as bad as it gets. This is your news media doing straight up propaganda for governments, and they know it. And they're actually submitting bids. They submitted bids to get these contracts.
Yeah, I mean, this turns out to be a major source of revenue for outlets like the BBC and Thomson and Reuters. And they have these little charitable foundations, BBC Media Action, Thomson Reuters Foundation, and that's where their gravy train rolls through. So why would they bite the hand that feeds them?
So now we know why we get such bad reporting from Reuters and BBC, especially when I first came in contact with the BBC's horrible reporting. It was surrounding Syria, and I couldn't believe it. They would literally cut people off who were telling the truth about what was happening in Syria. They go, "Sorry, we got to go." And I showed those videos, and people were like stunned. But now we know why. It's because their revenue source, it doesn't want them to tell the truth about Syria.
Well, it's even worse than that. If you're a British citizen and your tax dollars are paying for this, and these outlets are being secretly funded by a part of the British deep state that is actually attacking a candidate you support, like Jeremy Corbyn. Okay, the British Foreign Office. We know about this through a previous investigation we did based on previous leaks that were provided by this same anonymous collective. we know that the British Foreign Office was funding an operation that was smearing Jeremy Corbyn called the Integrity Initiative,
Yes.
which I'm sure you've reported on.
We've reported on them.
And a lot of the people that have attacked you over Syria, the Integrity Initiative was retweeting them,
Yes.
was tweeting out attacks. And the Integrity Initiative was a covert troll farm operating under the cover of a think tank called the Institute for Statecraft, which had a fake office in Scotland.
Yes.
And was being funded by the Foreign Office and this counter disinformation and media development department, and attacking Corbyn. Okay, so the BBC is getting money and all these gigs through that shadowy intelligence program. How does that affect their coverage of Jeremy Corbyn when Corbyn is the target of essentially a deep state plot, a national security state plot, and a fake anti-Semitism witch hunt? The BBC, number one, it's not going to cover that. I mean, the institutional inertia against any journalist who wants to cover the attacks on Corbyn and how it's actually a structural, coordinated, top-down attack is going to be so strong they can't do that. And the BBC's joining in the attack left and right.
Let's try. Let me try to make an analogy if this was happening in the United States. So let's say we found out that the CIA was funding the AP and PBS. And PBS was doing articles that said Saddam has weapons of mass destruction, even though they knew it was fake. And then if I did an article or did a story that pushed back on it, PBS would then smear me. And then the AP would retweet that. And so that's the equivalent of, and let's say that the CIA was paying the PBS and they were writing smears on Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders wanted to stop our foreign wars. Let's pretend he did. But that's basically what happened with the Washington Post, because the Washington Post has a $600 million deal, a deal that's worth twice what the Post is worth. And they ran 16 negative stories on Bernie Sanders in 16 hours. We all remember that. So people are looking for their revenue streams and trying to make sure they don't lose them. And the BBC and Reuters' big revenue streams is the CIA of England, over the UK, or the State Department. The State Department over there runs their CIA, which is their MI6. So if that happened here, which who knows? If that happened here, they don't need to make a deal with that. They just do it. But if that should be a huge scandal. What you're talking about should be the biggest, hugest scandal. And now you know why people don't trust the media anymore, because they're literally in bed with the governments that are lying to them. Instead of debunking the governments that are lying to them, they're doing the lying for the governments, the Reuters and the BBC. And that's what you uncovered.
Yeah. I mean, that was what I was able to synthesize and analyze through these documents. The BBC was even proposing to go into a conflict zone, the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine, where a civil war, which you could really call a proxy war, that's been imposed on the Russian-speaking population of Donbas by NATO after this regime change operation in Ukraine plunged the country into war. The BBC was proposing to go into the Donbas to set up and to amplify media that existed on the pro-NATO side in the Russian language to try to turn the tide of battle. Basically, the BBC was offering up its services for an information warfare operation in a conflict that should be de-escalated for the good of people on both sides. But the BBC doesn't want to de-escalate. They're proposing to go in and escalate. And I mean, this is the absolute greatest violation of journalistic ethics that I can think of. And of course, we can see, like from BBC's coverage, that they are not presenting a balanced picture of the conflict. They're not going and showing the suffering of people on the other side in Donbas who are just common people who are being shelled day after day. An even more stunning example of just not even, I don't even want to call it journalism. It's just straight up, psychological warfare and propaganda. and intelligence work. Is Bellingcat one of these outlets that was part of that Zinc Network consortium? The Zinc Network is a British intelligence contractor that specializes in strategic communications, which is, code for propaganda. They took UKFCO money and said, we have an emergency on our hands. North Moldova, one of these tiny little breakaway countries that was cut out of the corpse of Yugoslavia, was having an election in 2019 that was going to decide whether it would join NATO and start to become part of the EU. They didn't want to lose to the, pro-Russian candidate. And so they bring in Bellingcat and the DFR lab from the Atlantic Council to train up a media network, apparently to work on the pro-NATO side. Obviously, that's what they're going to do. And Bellingcat goes and interferes and meddles in an election. And this is like just they send their trainers in. Two figures were named in these documents. I don't know if they were the trainers. Arik Toller, who's one of the founders of Bellingcat, and the other is a guy named Christian Trebert, who is now the director of video investigations for the New York Times. Their bios were in these documents. And they, denied that they were doing anything nefarious. But to me, I mean, you if you want another analogy, imagine if the Chinese Foreign Ministry said, we have an emergency on our hands. Warnock's going to win in Georgia, and we really, I don't know who they would want there. We want Kelly Loeffler to win, so let's send in the gray zone to train up some Tea Party media and show them their special investigative techniques. And so the Chinese Foreign Ministry sends us into Georgia, and then it comes out. That would be on the cover of the New York Times. We would be removed from the internet and prosecuted. I would be in jail.
Yes.
That would be the end. But Bellingcat does this, and it's like, no, it's just a big shrug. Like, people obviously are concerned and outraged about this on Twitter. That's why Bellingcat was trending, but it doesn't affect their standing within Western media at all, that they're basically functioning as a British intelligence contractor to swing elections in Europe, because they're doing what the hack pack wants. They're doing what the whole, regime media wants them to do. So it's all fair, I guess. To me, it seems like a giant violation of journalistic ethics.
It feels to me like we're living in the craziest time we've ever lived in. But this stuff has never not happened, right? Like you just said, the documents that became so old that they got declassified, you could see them. Reuters was being paid by the governments back then to do propaganda, and then of course we know because of the Church Report about how the CIA and the news media totally infiltrated by intelligence, Western intelligence in the 70s and 80s, and you got to be a chump to think they've stopped doing that, because now not only do they have to hire them covertly like Ken Delinian, but they hire the guys right from the CIA and put them on air as commentators. What they're supposed to be doing is you're supposed to be hiring people to debunk those guys and tell us what the real truth is. They don't know. They bring on the guy from the CIA to give you the bullshit propaganda, and they present that as fact instead of bringing on someone so they've been doing it right out in the open. And since the era of Trump, the MSNBC, CNN, they hire people straight from the CIA. They put them on the payroll, and they're supposed to be their experts. No, they're the expert propagandists that you're supposed to be debunking, you knucklehead. And, well, they're not knuckleheads, right? So they know that it's all corruption, and they get away with it. And that's why we have a show. I don't know how long you and I will be allowed to do the news in the United States, and I'm not joking by saying that. I don't predict much longer. A guy like me in my garage in Pasadena is a threat to the Democratic Party, and so they're sicking their attack dogs on a fucking pothead comedian who talks into a camera in his garage. That's how fragile they are. That's how the truth will break them. They've got to stamp it out no matter where. They've been trying to discredit me for 5 years fucking straight. And I don't have a manager, so they can't fire me. And so all they can do is the same thing they're doing to you, is they're discrediting you. and they're trying to smear you and discredit you, just like Cornel West says. Get used to it. Get used to the character assassinations. Keep a smile on your face. This should be a much bigger story, and you should be winning awards for this. Do you think you'll get that Izzy Award?
I hope I get nominated. I mean, I.F. Stone is a hero of mine. His book on the Korean War is really, to me, a model of just using open source journalism to puncture official narratives. And, anyone watching this, if you haven't read I.F. Stone before, just look him up and learn about what he did, because he really sets the standard for what journalism is supposed to be. And it's about challenging power, real malevolent power that's just right in front of us as Americans. The most powerful, most destructive force on earth is right in front of us. It's right here where I am in Washington. And if we have any power to change anything, it's here. But what our media is doing is focusing on power thousands of miles away in countries that are besieged by the United States, that are surrounded by U.S. military bases, that have been colonized, that have been besieged for hundreds of years. And the journalists who win awards, they win awards for, Clarissa Ward went and tracked Russia's mercenaries in Africa. No one's reporting on what AFRICOM is doing. The U.S. has a network of military bases. It toppled an African leader and destabilized an entire region, and the Secretary of State laughed on camera about it. No one's scrutinizing that. No one's going to win an award for scrutinizing that. So I'm just trying to do, and we're at the Gray Zone, what we're trying to do, what we saw I.F. Stone do, and what we thought journalism was all about. Because once again, if we do live in anything that remotely resembles a democracy, and we definitely, it's not clear that we do, then we should exercise our power to change it, or at least reveal the fact that it doesn't exist and show the contradictions.
Hey, everybody, this is the part where I tell you where all our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then this is why I tell you to join our premium program and get extra content, but nobody's got a fucking job. So just enjoy the video.